who has ever hoped that you could clone yourself to make yourself more productive, right? Yeah, I got 3 boys at home. I think about that probably every second that I'm home with them. At Swoop, we're really trying to use AI to really essentially clone yourself, clone your brand to be where you want to be, where your customers are, and do that through 3 main ways. One is through our audience segmentation, helping you identify the right targets, the right customers. We do that through predictive analytics to help you understand when customers might become customers, potentials become customers, and then through engagement, and that's really through our conversational AI. So you probably really understand this better than a lot of folks that I've spoken to in the past, but really the state of medical device marketing is rapidly changing. There's an acceleration in the FDA approving new therapies, new diagnostic tools, new devices. Really, that's kind of changing the way that we go to market. Things are becoming more direct to the consumer. Things are becoming more ubiquitous in terms of how people understand the types of technologies that they can leverage to support their needs. We also see that the budgets are growing. Some folks here may disagree with that based on what we heard today, but in general, the folks that we polled, their budgets are actually increasing this year and likely into next year as well, which is a good thing, more dollars to spend. But I think there's still an element of being conservative and being targeted in how you spend those dollars. We also see this digital native HCP and clinician really coming to power. They're now aging into being the thought leaders in the space. They are used to doing things without human interaction. They grew up with cell phones and iPads in their hands. They are used to engaging in different ways than maybe a generation ago is used to engaging. There's also a shift in spend, and we heard a lot of that today. Traditional marketing approaches don't always work. That's because of the changing landscape, it's the changing approaches, and this rise of non-traditional mechanisms, Amazon TV, Hulu, Netflix, those things didn't exist when a lot of marketers were growing up. And so it's creating new opportunities, but it's also creating challenges in how you spend your dollars across 100 different channels rather than 4 different channels. And so I think that creates an opportunity to explore how you can optimize those dollars. Someone mentioned before, I think, Rena, you were talking about how AI generated your opening remarks. I think it did hit the mark on the 65%. So about 2/3 of commercial leaders, this is from a McKinsey article published not that long ago, so I think it's pulling from some real data, that they are using AI, and when they do use AI, they're seeing an increase in the impact on revenue. We also see a significant spend in AI across the entire portfolio of life sciences. $110 billion is going to be the annual investment in AI over the next few years. And there's a $30 billion impact on the commercial activities that we see across the life sciences sector. So AI is here, it's here to stay. And as we've been hearing a lot today, the increasing opportunity to invest in it to solve a lot of different use cases. So when Swoop thinks about the marketing funnel, we think about it in a couple of different ways. One is you need to find the key folks that you want to activate. We've built a very privacy-safe way. That was a big topic here as well. And we've done that through using AI behind the scenes, stitching a lot of data together to keep the anonymity, but then bridging it all together in a way that lets you find the appropriate targets. We also want to activate those targets. And that's really where you're spending your advertising dollars, through that programmatic media spend, through LinkedIn, through nonlinear TV, all the channels that exist today. You need to find ways to activate those customers so they actually want to learn about your products. They want to engage with what you have to offer. And really the engagement piece is a really critical piece. You're spending all these dollars to funnel people into these assets. And oftentimes they're going to a static website and they just kind of sit there and it falls short. So we're looking for ways to better optimize how you engage those folks. So you have richer conversations. That creates a lot of data. It creates more deeper connections with the brand and the message that you're trying to accomplish. But then pulling it all together, you need to optimize that. right? So it's one thing to drive folks to a particular asset. It's one thing for them to engage. But then you have to bring all that together and figure out how it's going to change your next stage of your marketing strategy. So how do we think about if we need to keep reinvesting in a particular channel? Are the messages landing? Are you actually hitting the right customers and the right audiences? And are they the ones that you want to target? Or are there new audiences that you didn't really expect to see coming to your platforms based on the kinds of questions that they're engaging with? So how do we go about doing all this? It sounds really great at the theoretical level, but let's try to get a little bit more tactical and give you some ways that you can actually go about doing this. So when we think about it, we start with the brand. What is your brand? Who are you trying to accomplish? Where are those things that differentiate you in the marketplace? What is your key value proposition? Then we try to think about that from an ideal patient audience perspective. You know, patients that are between the ages of X and Y, suffering from this condition, have these comorbidities, have failed on this treatment. What are those things that you're trying to identify from a patient or a consumer perspective, potential patient perspective? And then on the flip side of that, the treaters, the clinicians, the HCPs. How are they treating the ideal patient? What are they using today? Are they using a competitor? Are they not even using any therapies at all? Do you have to educate them? So understanding where those HCPs fall in their continuum and their journey, we bring all this data together and really coordinate that cross-channel identification piece. Again, lots of different data sets, some that we have within the Swoop internal capabilities, some that we're leveraging from our clients as well. And then we try to optimize those audiences. So again, who are you really trying to find? Which are the key targets? How do you want to spend those dollars? Because lots of us have a broad swath of potential customers, but depending upon where you are in your brand journey, you may need to hone in on very specific key groups so that you're really activating folks that matter most given where you are in your brand life cycle. So we pull that together to empower patients and their HCPs to have more educated conversations, and then that drives measurable results. So by pulling all this stuff into a connected ecosystem through, again, privacy-safe mechanisms, which I think is a key thing to think about as you're doing this kind of work, we're using AI behind the scenes. So we're not like a front-end AI company delivering a lot of out-facing technologies. It really powers all the things that we're doing behind the scenes. There's also a continuum here. And I think it's really important to understand how you can use predictive analytics to target things based on where patients and HCPs are in their journey. So from a pre-diagnosis perspective, all the way through adherence, and then to new product entries from a competitive perspective, there's a broad continuum that we should really be thinking about in terms of how you want to engage and identify those folks. So from a pre-diagnosis perspective, trying to understand when those leading indicators are going to exist that identify when a consumer is going to become a patient, or when an HCP is going to go from a non-adopter to an adopter. And adherence is key for a lot of medications, a lot of therapies. It's great that they get started on that medication, but keeping them from a lifetime value of the customer perspective is really key. And if you can start to understand when people fall off the adherence wagon, you can re-engage them before that happens. You can also work with the office staff in the clinician's office to provide more education services and wraparound services and capabilities so they don't fall off the adherence perspective. And then because it's an ever-changing landscape, there's always new competitors, new products, new things coming on board. So how are you going to assess when an HCP or a patient is likely going to switch onto some other therapy? That could be because their neighbor's taking it or their neighbor heard about this and they want to switch. It could be that the HCP maybe had a less than optimal experience in some facet of their treatment journey and they're looking for some new opportunities. So by using some AI behind the scenes, we're starting to be more predictive to understand when those activities and those triggers might occur, and then you can target them effectively through your programmatic and media spend. But again, in the changing landscape, right now there are 12 states that are putting out privacy language, both for HCPs and for consumers. It's hard to keep abreast of what's actually changing. And there's another 24 to 28 states that are working on their own language. that's a major task. If you're a large organization, like a Medtronic, like a J&J, there's probably a team of legal folks and experts that are assessing this. If you're on the smaller side, it can be really hard to keep abreast of all these different elements. So from a Swoop perspective, we try to bring that consultative approach to help you understand how these things come to bear and sort of build that into some of our capabilities. We also think about going above and beyond. We were one of the early companies that thought about this from a privacy safe perspective and sort of built this into our AI and how we approach our whole ecosystem. So that's a little bit of the backdrop. So what does the future of customer engagement really look like? As we've heard before, a lot of money is being invested in advertising dollars, about $15 billion in life sciences in 2023 alone, which is a ton of money. And sometimes there's a lot of leakage that goes in there. So the idea here is people are driving to typically a static brand.com website, but oftentimes that experience is lacking because it's just an overwhelming amount of information, or it's very basic and they can't actually get what they're looking for. So we think about trying to optimize that experience and reduce that waste, reduce that leakage by changing the way that folks can engage with the content on your brand sites. Because it's not just enough, to reach the right audience. It's how do you keep them there to really drive script lift or drive engagement, drive prescribing behavior. That's always been the holy grail of life sciences, right? We're sort of an indirect seller oftentimes. We rely on the clinician to write the product. We don't go direct to the consumer in many cases, but that is changing as well. But the reality is we need to drive script lift. How do we go about doing that? So we think about conversational AI as the new standard to really engage with customers. We've heard a lot today about the power of Gen AI and how oftentimes it sits more of an in-house perspective because it's very safe, and there's also a lot of use cases there. We've taken the approach from an outside in and really thinking about how you can deploy it in outward-facing use cases because there's other technologies that are from an internal perspective. Anyone know when websites were first launched, how old the technology is? Close. Any other takers? 1991. Right, so very old technology that has become essentially the way that we engage with our customers today. Nothing wrong with websites. They're wonderful for a lot of reasons, but without the evolution of the changing technology, they kind of become, essentially not quite useless, but verging on useless, just like any kind of legacy technology becomes. So we've introduced the concept of conversational AI. So might sound pretty innocuous. Everyone's probably used ChatGPT, which was what you typically think about from a conversational AI perspective. It's very similar, intuitive experience. You type in your questions, your prompts, ask questions in a very natural way, and then you get an answer that's very human-like. But really what the missing piece for ChatGPT, Anthropic, Llama, these other ones, is that you don't know what they're going to say. They were trained to deliver a response, regardless of whether that's the accurate response, whether it's an approved response, whether it's a factual response. And so conversational AI is generative AI with guardrails to ensure that the compliant message is always being put out there. So it's consistent, it's repeatable, and it's always on brand. We've been doing this for a little bit over 8 years now. We started as a chatbot. We have a jar in our office, or our virtual office, that anyone who says the word chatbot has to put $1 in the swear jar, because we think of chatbot as a less than experience. It was very novel, 8-10 years ago, and that's how we started our organization as well. And then it kind of moved into the more of the traditional decision tree matrix and approach, which again keeps those guardrails in place, but is very hard to change. When you have new clinical data, when you have a new message, when you want to target a new segment, you have to go through an entire process of remapping all these decision trees and all these conversation flows, and that's very onerous. Conversational AI kind of flattens that approach and uses more of an FAQ style document to load in n number of different questions across n number of different segments and use cases, and again keeps those guardrails on, which we think is very, 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 very powerful in the market today. So what does this help you do? It really helps you do 3 main things. One is optimize and improve the customer experience by delivering more engaging conversations that meet people at the moment that they need to be met through compliant conversations. It also drives customer engagement. So if your goal is to drive folks to download a patient guide, if your goal is to have them sign up for training, you can drive that through very intelligent conversations and walk people through that journey while still answering their questions. Help them along that process so they want to engage, they want to download that material that you're looking for. It also creates a ton of data. So it allows you to do essentially primary market research in real time, 24/7 with the customers that you're targeting. That's a very expensive proposition if you do that outside of a closed loop system like we're building here. Because you have to go identify those folks, recruit them, make sure that they're not just lifelong market research test subjects. This is getting unvarnished from your customer input about what they care about most, where they are in their journey, and most importantly, things that you might not be thinking about or know about those customers. You're getting this real world information, and you're really doing it at scale, and it's always on. So what does that look like in practical terms? It may not look that different than a ChatGPT experience, but it's the technology and the ecosystem behind the scenes that allows us to deliver this kind of capability. So it understands contextual nuance, it engages in compliant conversations. Again, it's very consistent, very repeatable. It's fully scalable across lots of different platforms, number of brands, number of conversations, number of engagements. And it triages users to existing assets as well. So you're not always recreating those things. You're actually using the technology, the conversational inputs to drive folks to the assets that you've already spent a lot of time and energy creating. It also provides adverse event and product quality detection. So someone's saying, hey, my syringe broke, or hey, I'm having trouble with a broken aligner. It identifies those in real time and then triggers the appropriate triage mechanism to escalate to a customer service hotline, to fill out a form, to report this information. Whatever your internal processes are, it aligns to those. And like I said before, it really drives that valuable first-party data. It's typically anonymous, so you're getting true interactions without that bias of being a known quantity. This is particularly important with clinicians and HCPs and the medical staff, because oftentimes they may be embarrassed to ask questions. They might be expected to know all this stuff about your brand, and by having that anonymity, it lets them freely ask questions when they need it the most. So how does this work in practical terms? Again, we help find those ideal customer segments through data and AI behind the scenes in that privacy-safe way. We help optimize which channels you should target those customers in. We drive them to your brand.com and really help them engage with meaningful conversations that's simple, easy to use, and offers a lot of power from the data input perspective. And then that data really helps you optimize your brand strategy. We had a client who is in the women's health space. They thought they knew about everything about their HCPs. It's a very, very old product. And they realized that they were driving a lot of HCPs to their brand.com website. And the questions that the HCPs were asking in the agent really surprised them. So much, in fact, that they actually had to retrain and provide new materials to their sales reps to go re-educate the market about some key fundamentals about their product. So there's a lot of opportunity where you think you know your market and you're doing all this research, but again, based on how people are asking questions and what questions they're asking, you actually can learn a whole host of new things about them. We think about this from a whole landscape perspective. So the beauty of conversational AI is we think about it. Yes, it sits on your brand website, but you can drive traffic there through any number of channels, QR codes, programmatic, LinkedIn. It doesn't really matter how you get them there, but this opens the door to create a whole host of new opportunities to engage with your key audiences. And this data spans not just the conversational input, but we're also doing a lot of linking on the back end. So we partnered with LiveRamp and Datavant to collect information from website users that we end up then anonymizing and aggregating on a regular basis, so you can get a better sense of who's really engaging with your website. This is really powerful as well to, again, drive those hidden insights. There might be a new segment, a new target audience that you didn't realize will be coming to your site based on your marketing materials. You might find that's actually a caregiver who's coming more than the actual patient themselves. So it really creates a lot of opportunity for you to understand even more deeply the folks that are engaging with your website. And then we also provide a lot of demographic information as well. Race, gender, age, state, location. So you get a broader sense as well of who's really engaging with the platform and whether that aligns with your brand strategy or not. It helps you optimize and again, pivot if you need to, because you're getting a better sense of who's interacting with the agent, but also within the website, more broadly speaking. And the conversation data isn't just about the user input and the user output, but we also collect a lot of information from a URL string around UTM parameters. So you can actually tie these things back to very specific campaigns. So it's kind of giving you even richer data than just those inputs and outputs to understand how people are flowing in there, where they're coming from, and how they might be thinking about where those things align in their minds of their patient journey or user journey. All right. So now some real life examples to start to close things out, and we'll take some questions. So we have a case study here around Abbott. They wanted to overcome some low awareness and understanding of their MR treatment, which is a common but rarely diagnosed valve condition. We created a privacy-safe, again, segment that allowed Abbott to find and target appropriate audiences for activation in their preferred channels. And that campaign generated a 14x lift from an ROI perspective and really drove traffic by 154% within 3 months. So again, the power of identifying the right audiences can have an immense power. You combine that with the engagement mechanisms, and you're now getting those right folks to engage with the right content at the right time. And again, it's 24/7, 365. So whenever those folks have those questions and need to engage, it's always on. Unlike having a rep or a contact center, which typically have office hours or hours of operation, this is 24/7. So it's always available for your customers when they need it. From a conversational AI perspective, we see that we can drive engagement by massive percentages here, both from a patient and HCP perspective. So we were working with a neurological product in the migraine space. They did a lot of social media outreach, had a lot of influencers, so they were driving a lot of traffic to the website. So their challenge was really to improve the customer experience, because while they were driving a lot of traffic to the website, there was very little engagement because the website was a little outdated. It was kind of messy from an engagement perspective, and people were coming there not finding the right information and then leaving. So when we deployed the conversational AI technology on their website, we had over 2,500 healthcare prescribers were getting their questions answered in the moment of need rather than abandoning the website. There were 90,000 patient inquiries. So again, it's a very large space, migraines, a lot of people have migraines. They were doing a lot of social media outreach as well. So they were driving a lot of traffic. But we saw a 400% lift, a 4x lift in those high-value HCP activities. So that was downloading copay cards, downloading patient brochures to educate patients in the office. And that was done as a comparison to their pre-launch of using conversational AI. We also were looking at whether or not these HCPs were already using the therapy or whether they were nascent visitors or adopters. And what we found is that 47% were inquiring about information around drug safety and 30% around cost and coverage. So we found that by identifying where these needs were, we could better articulate the high value actions to try to drive these HCPs to make better informed decisions around treatment behavior. So with about 5 minutes left to spare and get you guys out to lunch, we have a couple of minutes for questions. Yeah.
Do you know about what % of people are engaging with the conversational AI?
Yeah, how many people are engaging with the conversational AI? It really depends. It depends where they're coming from, why they're there on the website, what we've typically seen, and we try to auto launch the agent from a specific topic. If you're doing, particularly if you're doing programmatic ads or like QR codes or things like that. So generally we see about 50% to 60% engagement from an organic user, and then it's upwards of 80 to 90% when they're coming from a clickable ad that's already linked to the content that they're interested in. So if someone's seeing a banner ad for cost and coverage, we're actually launching that conversation with information about a copay card or a savings program, things along those lines. Yeah, there's a couple in the back.
Yeah, I was curious about your backend, Eric. A lot of times, our companies have proprietary assets, right? And oftentimes the data is very unstructured. It could be in the form of webinars, podcasts, PDFs. It's not always in a structured format that can be parsed, right, by an agent. Do you guys have the ability to kind of take unstructured data and parse it and give a contextual response?
We do, but that's where we kind of use humans in the loop for a bit of that, right? Because there's an element to having, again, it can only go so far to use generative AI to parse those things. So typically what we do is have a human in the loop process to review that content for references, for sanity checks, things along those lines. So we do have the ability, but oftentimes we have a content team, an editor team as well that comes in and reviews it for sanity purposes. But yeah.
How do you navigate privacy and cookie acceptance and tracking? Are you in harmony with the website you're positioned on? How does that all work?
So we're integrated with OneTrust right now as a cookie management platform, and so depending upon how the user, what your process is around opting in or opting out of those cookie tracking mechanisms, we are connected into right now just OneTrust, which we find a lot of folks are using in the health and life sciences space. So we adopt those protocols. So if someone has opted out of being tracked, then we would kind of not track them as well from a data perspective. If they've opted in, then obviously we're looking at their data from a more holistic perspective.
One more maybe follow-up question. What is on the front end? Is that an off-the-shelf LLM like GPT-4 or Llama, or is it your proprietary home-built?
Yes, we're using an off-the-shelf LLM, but we're fine-tuning it for the healthcare space. So prior to launching our LLM-based approach, we actually built a proprietary NLU model, and we have about 1 billion conversations over the last 8 years that we've generated. So we're using a lot of that corpus of data to fine-tune the LLM so it understands medical terminology, brand names, things like adverse events and product quality complaints. That's all been layered in, so we're fine-tuning things on top of an open-source LLM.
So
in the back?
I have a very different question, but in relation to LLM and BML, can your AI also read competitors' website?
Can it do, sorry?
Competitors' website.
No, so right now we're only focused on yourbrand.com platform. If there's comparison data, obviously if you've done like a head-to-head clinical trial or something like that, that can be layered into the agent's response, but we're keeping it very firewall. We found from a regulatory compliance perspective, people have asked us that before, and it's kind of always been shot down from an internal regulatory perspective. So from a technology perspective, theoretically, yes, but typically from a legal compliance perspective, from our clients' end, they've always said that's off the table. Yeah.
If a organization was interested in doing this, what level of maturity with LLM would they need to have? Is it a good starter program?
0. So we bring all that to the table. I think that's one of the things that we found is that LLMs can be scary. They're not that hard to use, but I think when you wrap around all the other components around, unless you have a team that understands privacy, integrations with cookie management, the fine-tuning of LLMs, the prompt engineering layer to understand all the different ways that a person might ask a very similar question, that can feel overwhelming and can be overwhelming. So we try to take that heavy lift off the table and essentially build, it's a SaaS type of a model where we work with you to develop the right content, and we actually have a template that helps you understand what we think are the top questions. We found that 80% of questions across multiple therapeutic categories are encapsulated with about 50 to 75 questions. And so we kind of bring that to the table to really supersede getting this off the ground. The fastest that we've launched an agent, even through MLR approval processes, is about 45 days. So rather quickly in the grand scheme of things. Yeah.
Thanks. So, from our, marketing, digital strategies and our site itself, we're focused both on, the customer, as the HCP, but then we also do a lot of direct to consumer and, we're marketing to the patient. So how well does it recognize, which is visiting the site and kind of how to direct the conversation?
Yeah, great question. So we handle that in a couple of different ways. One is oftentimes you have an HCP-facing asset and a consumer-facing asset. So we actually have two different agents with different types of content. That's our typical approach. But you can also just ask the person. If you're not sure of who they are, it's like, hey, I'd love to help you, but tell me more about yourself. Are you an HCP? Are you a patient? Are you a caregiver?